It wasn't the insult that broke me. It was the silence. The way their eyes slid past me, as if starched fabric and metals meant nothing, as if the years I had bled, stitched, earned, vanished the second I walked into the courtyard. My brother's hand hovered to wave, then dropped. My mother adjusted her shawl, looked at her phone, and my father, ever the quiet judge, narrowed his eyes at the brass on my chest like it was an offense. They said nothing, but silence is a scalpel when it's wielded by blood. I stood at the edge of the Naval Academy's graduation lawn in full dress uniform, silver aiguillettes brushing against my shoulder. The flags flanked the stage, barely moving, but the wind in my stomach wouldn't stop. Behind me, classmates tightened their caps and adjusted collars. One by one, names were rehearsed. One by one, pride shone from families across the bleachers. But mine, they sat in the third row, middle left, a place they'd fought for in every way except truth. My mother had insisted on being there, but I knew what she meant. Be there, not see you. You know that ache, don't you? When your name's called and you hear every clap but theirs, when the world salutes, but your own family just sighs. I hadn't cried in years, but standing in that courtyard, with heels clicked and spine straight, my throat burned with a salt I hadn't tasted since I was 17. Back when I told them I wouldn't be a teacher like Mom, wouldn't be a lawyer like Dad, wouldn't marry safe like my sister. I'm joining Naval Intelligence, I said, and they laughed, not with cruelty, worse, with disbelief. I was the quiet one, the girl who memorized chess patterns, took her coffee alone, and came home with bleeding palms from rope courses no one asked me to do. They thought it was a phase, but now I was in uniform, not a dress, not a borrowed blazer. But that didn't stop my sister from whispering to her husband. She could have worn something softer. Softness doesn't earn security clearances. I adjusted my gloves, checked the alignment of my cap. From the speaker at the front, the president's voice echoed through the quad, warm, practiced, resounding with a cadence only power could polish. The President of the United States, here for us. And my parents couldn't even look me in the eye. You think you've made peace with invisibility, until the moment comes when being seen would cost them too much. The announcer's voice crackled through the microphone. Commander candidates. Line for recognition. I was 7th in line. 7. Ironic. My father always said I was the 7th problem in his life. Ahead of me stood Ramos, who once pulled me from a sinking dive suit. Behind me, Taylor, whose father clapped so hard every rehearsal. The instructors joked he should get a diploma too, but I stood alone. I had cleared black site briefings, survived immersion drills with hypothermia nipping at my ears, passed signals training with honors, but nothing prepared me for this. The quiet blade of my brother looking away. My boots struck the platform in sequence. 4 paces. Turn, halt, salute. I saluted with a hand that had once held coordinates for drone guidance over hostile terrain, with a hand that had signed off on classified decryptions, a hand that, today, trembled. The president stepped forward. He didn't just shake my hand. He said, "Commander, well done." The breath in my lungs turned into stone, not officer, not cadet. Commander. He saw what they wouldn't say. He knew what they wouldn't learn. Behind me, I felt the crowd lean in, even the ones who'd ignored me. A whisper traveled. The title had changed. My mother's smile, fixed and hollow, cracked for just a second. My father tilted his head, the kind of tilt he gave when something broke protocol. And my sister crossed her arms. I wanted to look at them, to see if maybe, just maybe. But I didn't. I turned from the president with a nod, walked 4 paces down, Boots firm, shoulders square. I had been mocked, erased, diminished. But now the highest office in the nation had called me what they never could. Commander. You know what that means, don't you? It's not just rank. It's authority in silence. I stepped back into line. Taylor whispered, "Holy sht. He never says that." I didn't respond. Not because I was proud, but because if I opened my mouth, the storm would spill. As the ceremony continued, I stared straight ahead. But my mind wasn't in the parade ground anymore. It was 12 years ago. In a kitchen. Military. My father scoffed. "You're barely 5'2". You'll break before you begin. It was 9 years ago. Outside a recruiter's office, my sister texting, "This is embarrassing. We're not a war family." It was 5 years ago. After Intel school, my brother who'd failed his bar exam told our cousin I was doing some admin thing overseas. And now, I stood in front of 1,000 witnesses, with the president's voice still ringing. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need their claps. I had something they couldn't fake. Recognition earned in silence, the kind of silence that finally made them feel small. As we marched in formation down the avenue of flags, the crowd rose. Hands clapped, flags waved. My squad commander barked the final command, eyes left, and for the first time I let myself glance. 3rd row, middle left. My mother's cheeks were wet. My father's lips parted but made no sound. And my sister. She looked at me like she didn't know who I was. Good. Because who I was? They never bothered to meet. The bus ride back to the hotel was quiet. The kind of quiet that follows controlled explosions when the dust settles. But the pressure hasn't. My uniform was still tight across the chest, the ceremonial medals pinned in exact symmetry, but I could feel the weight of them differently now. Heavier. Not with pride. With memory. The president's handshake still pulsed in my palm like a second heartbeat. But instead of replaying it, I kept seeing my father's expression, not anger, not shame, confusion. Like the rules had changed and no one told him. Like someone handed the family's script to a stranger and I started reading lines they never wrote for me. I didn't sit with them at the post-graduation reception. My unit had a small gathering on the 3rd floor, nothing lavish. Just drinks and stories, and the occasional speech from someone who'd once led a mission without backup and came back with 3 missing fingers and no regrets. But even there, even among my own, I drifted. You know that feeling, don't you? When you win the war, but still feel like a ghost at the feast. I stood at the balcony alone, eyes fixed on the reflection of my uniform in the hotel's glass. It should have felt like a shield, but that night, it looked like armor I hadn't earned. "Commander." The voice startled me. It was Sergeant Doyle, one of the few who'd ever outranked me during Intel training. She'd lost her wife in Yemen and never once let her grief show except in the way she saluted too sharp, too hard, like trying to make time obey. "Hell of a day," she said, sipping something golden. "You okay?" I almost said yes, but my eyes betrayed me. She nodded like she already knew. "Family came." I nodded. "They clap?" I shook my head. She sipped again. "Mine never did either. Not until I got the call for Baghdad. And then suddenly, I was a hero. Funny how close to death you gotta be before they call you brave." I didn't speak. She leaned on the railing. "You know, my father once told me I'd never be more than someone's assistant. Called my uniform a phase. He's gone now. I never forgave him. But I stopped needing his permission to exist. That's the closest I came to peace." I turned to her, voice low. "Do you think they'll ever respect it?" She smiled not kindly, but truthfully. "No. But the world will. And that's louder." The wind picked up, brushing through my ribbons. I could still feel the eyes from earlier, the ones that had watched me mount that stage, the ones that had heard the president's words. That moment was mine. But the ache didn't fade just because the country saluted. You understand that, don't you? The difference between public validation and private abandonment. The next morning, I didn't wait for their call. I packed my gear in perfect order, folded the dress blues with care, and requested early deployment. My next assignment was Black Ops Classified, stationed in undisclosed waters. No news coverage, no stage, just duty. I left a note at the hotel desk. Thanks for coming. I'll be out of reach. Tell Mom not to worry. Commander N. No signature, no return number. They didn't want a daughter. They wanted a version. And I wasn't one they wrote. The deployment was brutal. Not in the way civilians imagine gunfire and blood and explosions, but in the silence, the cold metal of underwater stations, the flickering lights of submarine corridors, the constant scent of oil and seawater. There, I was nobody's child. I was only clearance level, rank, and results. It was a relief. 3 months into mission silence, I received an encrypted comm in the dead hour of rotation. It was short. From Director SR. Content. Well done in the Strait. We've escalated your clearance. Immediate reassignment pending. Civilian briefing in DC. Uniform required. That last part struck me. Uniform required. Not fatigues, not ops gear, dress, ceremony. I didn't ask questions. I responded with one word, acknowledged. The flight into DC was ghosted. No manifest. My name didn't appear on anything commercial or internal. Escort vehicles met me on tarmac, handed me a new badge with a black border and a single word command. That's when I knew this wasn't a debrief. This was optics. And optics mean exposure, visibility, and sometimes they mean family. I arrived at the hall 2 hours before the event. My boots echoed on marble, my gloves tightened by instinct. There were rows of seats, flags, a podium, and at the center a plaque with 7 names. I didn't know them, but I knew what it meant. 7 operatives, mission success, no faces, just titles. And at the bottom command coordinated by CDR. N. My name. Not even coded. They wanted it known. I was led backstage. Told the president would again say a few words. This time in private. Commander. He greeted, but not with ceremony, with respect. I've seen your records. The Strait was almost a massacre, but it wasn't. I nodded once. He gestured toward the curtain. We'll call your name. The families of the fallen are here. Stand with them. That's all you have to do. I turned to step into the light, and then I saw them. 3rd row. Again. My family. Same spots. Same silence. But this time they weren't whispering. They were listening. A name was called. Then mine. As I walked forward, I saw my brother straighten. My sister lower her eyes. My father stood stiffly, confusion still shadowing his face, and my mother, her hands clutched the program so tightly the paper wrinkled. I didn't stop at their row. I stepped forward, stood at attention beside the widow of a fallen lieutenant. I offered her my glove. She took it. We said nothing. The cameras flashed. The president spoke. But I heard none of it. All I heard was the silence behind me, the kind that shifts, the kind that breaks, because the world was watching, and this time so were they. After the ceremony, I didn't go to them. I saw their eyes scanning the room, waiting for the version of me they'd recognize to appear. But she was gone, if she'd ever truly existed. The receiving hall emptied slowly. Officers shook hands, widows embraced. A few cameras snapped official photographs for press archives that would be redacted before publication. History had a way of editing, but today, it had written me in bold. I stood alone beside a memorial banner, its fabric thick with silence. My gloves were tucked under my arm, my cap still level. A military aide offered me a glass of water, which I accepted out of protocol more than thirst. "You could say something," a voice said behind me. I turned. My sister, still in the same pale blue dress she wore at graduation, still with a pearl pin that looked like it belonged to our mother, still unable to meet my eyes. I said. She hesitated. "You're really in this deep?" "Huh?" I didn't reply. She gestured vaguely toward the rows of flags. "All of this. Secret missions. Rank. The president knowing your name. That's real." I looked at her, slowly, letting her feel the full weight of what she'd just asked. "You thought it was for show." I thought. She stopped, correcting herself. "We didn't know what to think. You never explained. You never asked." She flinched, just barely. But I saw it. She shifted again. "Mom's been crying. You know that." "Right," I saw. "She doesn't know how to talk to you anymore. She never did." It wasn't anger in my voice. It was calm. And that, somehow, unnerved her more. "You've known that silence, haven't you? The one where someone finally realizes they never tried to know who you are, only who you were supposed to be." She looked down at her shoes, then at the carpet, then finally at me. "You're not coming to the dinner, are you?" I gave the softest nod. "No." "Why not?" she asked. Not accusatory, just hollow. I let the words land gently. "Because you'll still talk about me like I'm not there." She looked away. "That's not true." "It is." A long pause. She clenched her hands together like a child facing scolding. "Then, we said things. Back then. About your job. About your personality. We were just scared. Scared of what I wanted to ask. Scared that the daughter who didn't fit your blueprint would command things you'll never understand. But I stayed silent. That silence was my power now." She turned to leave, but hesitated again. "Are you happy that one caught me off guard?" Happiness wasn't something I'd measured in years. Success? Yes. Readiness? Capability? But happiness? I met her gaze. "I'm steady." That seemed to be enough for her. She left. Outside, the evening wind carried the chill of late fall. My ride hadn't arrived yet, and I didn't request an escort. I wanted to walk. Just a little. In full uniform. Through the streets that once belonged to them, but now answered to me. I passed a group of tourists near the reflecting pool. A child tugged her father's sleeve and pointed. "She's a commander," she whispered, wide-eyed. He turned, nodded with the weight of recognition. That's the thing about strangers. They see you for what you present. But family, they look for the past and panic when it's gone. I walked to the edge of the water. My reflection stared back, stiff collar, metals gleaming, eyes darker than I remembered. Not from sorrow, from clarity. I remembered when I was 12, wearing my brother's oversized ROTC jacket in the backyard, pretending to lead a rescue op. My father laughed. My mother said I looked ridiculous. My sister warned me boys wouldn't like that. None of them saw the soldier forming under the surface. They saw a girl playing pretend. But the girl kept marching, even when no one clapped. You ever march alone? Not to be brave, but because stopping meant vanishing. A black sedan pulled up by the curb. The driver stepped out, crisp suit, unmarked badge. "Commander," he said with a nod. "Time to go." I took one last look at the water, then turned and entered the car. We drove in silence for a while. The city flickered past monuments, shadows, echoes of speeches that once filled these streets. "I have a file for you," the driver finally said, passing a sealed envelope across the seat. "They want your eyes only." I opened it. coordinates, personnel lists, one photo, and beneath it, primary command interface, psychological resilience profile approved. My next command. The thing about being underestimated is this: by the time they notice, you've already built the room they're trying to enter. As we neared the airfield, the driver asked, "Anything you want us to tell your family?" I thought for a second, then shook my head. No. Let them wonder. Let them sit at the dinner table and try to explain why the president stood when I entered. Let them whisper about the silence, the unreturned calls, the fact that I never needed them to applaud, only to not erase. But they did. And so now, I'm gone. Not bitter. Not vengeful. Just beyond. You understand, don't you? That strange freedom when you no longer need to be understood at the tarmac. The jet was waiting sleek, black, unmarked. I climbed aboard without hesitation. Inside, the co-pilot turned and saluted. "Welcome aboard, Commander." I took my seat, set my cap on the tray, rested my hands on my knees. Out the window, the city shrank. The monuments, the memorial hall, the third row. I didn't wave. They would learn, or they wouldn't. Either way, it was no longer mine to fix. I didn't need them to respect me. The whole room already did. The hum of the jet was softer than expected. A low, steady sound like breath through steel lungs. I didn't speak during takeoff. No orders to give. No directions to clarify. I sat still, hands folded over my gloves, eyes watching as clouds swallowed the city below the monuments, the buildings, the past. We ascended into altitude silence. There's a different kind of quiet up here. Not the kind used as punishment. Not the silence of relatives who choose not to clap. This silence is clean, crisp, almost sacred. It does not judge. It only surrounds. I leaned my head back, closed my eyes. Somewhere over Kansas, I felt it, not peace, but something like distance finally earned. Like space had grown between the girl who once begged for recognition and the woman now addressed as commander without pause. You've felt that moment before, haven't you? When the grief doesn't vanish but it loosens. We landed at a base I couldn't name. No insignias, no flags, just a series of hangars, steel gray under a dying sun. The air smelled of fuel and control. As I stepped onto the tarmac, the officer waiting there didn't ask for my credentials. He saluted before I spoke. "Commander," he said, "welcome to Sector 9. No questions, no hesitations, just clarity." I was led to a concrete room beneath the runway, 4 monitors, a large black table, 2 chairs. A mission dossier already waited, sealed in red wax, flanked by a retinal scanner. I sat down. The door closed behind me. The screen flickered to life. A face appeared, not familiar but known. A woman in her 50s. Eyes sharp, voice precise. "Commander, I've read every report you've submitted in the last 6 years. You don't need to prove anything anymore. That phase is over." I didn't respond. She continued. "What we need now is presence, not obedience. We're reassigning you to an autonomous command unit, black clearance. No chain. You'll report directly to me. You'll see operations even our top brass only speculate about." She leaned in. "You ready?" I answered with the calm I'd earned the hard way. "Yes, ma'am." She tapped a screen. My new badge was minted. "Good. You ship out tomorrow. For now, debrief. Locker 17, there's something we've held for you." I stood, nodded once. In Locker 17, I found a box. Slim, locked. My clearance opened it. Inside, an envelope with my family's address, unsent letters, 6 of them, all written by me, all returned, marked, "No forwarding address." My handwriting looked foreign now, curled, apologetic, small. Letters dated after my first deployment, after the underwater accident in the strait, after the mission that almost left me trapped beneath 12 meters of steel and salt. I had written them thinking, maybe now they'll want to hear from me. Apparently, not. And yet, I didn't feel pain. I felt something colder. A fact. I burned them in the disposal chute without reading a single word. I'd already lived their answers. That night, I lay on a bunk in quarters more Spartan than ceremonial. No sheets tucked in pride, no folded flag at the corner, just concrete, gray, and the hum of readiness. Sleep didn't come easily. Not because of nightmares, but because the mind doesn't know how to rest when it's used to being erased. You get that, don't you? That ache of constantly proving you deserve to stay in the room. In the morning, I dressed without music, hair back, collar straight. I wore the uniform like skin, not costume, not armor, just truth. I walked to the transport zone alone, no fanfare, no crowd. But every step felt like thunder, not from sound, but from memory. I remembered the kitchen arguments, the dinners where my name was avoided, the wedding where my seat was missing, the birthday I spent underwater, while my sister posted vacation photos with captions like, "Real bravery is motherhood." I remembered each moment not as pain, but as fuel. The transport plane was ready. The officer in charge handed me a sealed package. "You'll open this when you land. One comm allowed. Choose wisely." I boarded without pause. Inside, there were only 2 other passengers, both silent, both staring ahead. Operatives, no introductions, just mutual understanding. We flew for hours. Somewhere over the Atlantic, the sun cracked through clouds, flooding the bay door with gold. That's when the ache returned. Not of needing them, but of what they'd never see. They would never know the names I'd carried, the ones who died with my hand in theirs. They would never know what I risked, so that people like them could sit safely in pews and smile at graduations. They would never know the darkness I walked through just to stand in a light they refused to offer. And they would never know how many times I almost gave up, not in battle, but in the silence between. You've lived there, haven't you? That liminal space between hope and detachment, when your soul whispers, "Let go." They'll never clap anyway. And then, you rise. Because you weren't built to be clapped for. You were built to lead. The jet touched down on an island I couldn't find on any map. Lush, fogged, quiet. A new base. A new command. And on the tower wall freshly painted a symbol I hadn't seen in years. The unit crest from my first Black Ops mission. Someone remembered. A woman greeted me. She looked familiar. Not in face, but in bearing. The same stillness I'd worn since the president's handshake. She saluted. "Colonel." I blinked. She repeated. "Your rank was upgraded in flight. Colonel N. Welcome to Shadow Command." Colonel. It hit like thunder in the chest, not because of pride, but because the girl they erased had now outranked every man who once silenced her. I saluted back. I didn't need to call home. Let them hear it on the news. Or not. Let them stumble when the secretary says my name in briefings they never understood. Let them sit in silence at another family dinner and feel the weight of what they never nurtured. Because I didn't rise for their applause. I rose because the mission demanded it. And now I commanded the mission. I didn't need them to respect me. The whole room already did. There's a moment, it comes rarely, when the past finally loses its grip. For me, that moment came 3 days into Shadow Command. The base was buried in the belly of a mountain, ringed by rainforest, hidden by fog and decades of deniable funding. No press, no insignias, only retina scanners, deep code keycards, and officers who didn't speak unless it was operational. I was briefed every morning by a team who didn't flinch when they said containment, extraction, or domestic asset failure. Here, I was not a daughter, not a sister, not a disappointment. Here, I was Colonel, and they said it without hesitation, without a flicker of surprise. That was new. That was sacred. They didn't care that I was small, or quiet, or female. They only cared that I never missed a decision, never needed a second guess, never blinked when the math turned lethal. On the fourth morning, I was given full access to Command Nexus. That's when it became real. 8 screens, 1 central chair, 3 encrypted lines. A wall of silence broken only by incoming field reports from agents under my lead. I listened. I weighed. I responded. And every command I gave was met with confirmed, "Colonel." Not once did anyone say, "Are you sure?" Not once did anyone ask if I'd like to check with someone more senior, because there wasn't anyone more senior, and I wonder, has anyone ever given you the thing they always denied you? Not love, not praise, but authority. The kind that can't be revoked. Because it's not granted, it's earned. I sat there, hands steady on the desk, as operations flickered across the satellite feeds. One showed a rogue signal off the Norwegian coast, another a desert camp in North Africa, the third a compromised data vault in Montana. Each report ended the same: awaiting orders. Colonel. And each time I spoke, I felt something hard and permanent settle into my spine, a knowing, a weight I was meant to carry. At 1900 hours, I dismissed the core team, told them I would run final clearance on my own. The room emptied. Silence fell again, but this time, it felt earned. I stood, walked to the far wall where a single steel panel held secure files, no one accessed without top-tier authority. I entered my code, retina scanned, voice print verified. The panel hissed open, inside a single folder, not digital, not encrypted, paper. And on it, N013, civilian surveillance log. My number, my old designation, from before I was even commissioned. I hesitated, then opened it. Inside were photos, pages, audio transcripts, all surveillance, not of enemy targets, of me, dates spanning 10 years. From the day I walked into the recruitment office, to the day I stood on that graduation stage in my uniform, they'd been watching me. But not because they didn't trust me, because they knew. I wasn't just applying for naval intel, I was already being tested for command. I flipped the pages. Each note detailed things I had never shared aloud. Subject displayed early resilience pattern, emotional detachment under parental suppression. High stress threshold, operates under social isolation without behavioral compromise. Unusually high mission loyalty, sacrifices personal connection for output integrity. Each page, a mirror. Each line, something I had once thought was weakness, framed now as selection criteria. I was never invisible. I was observed. I was never forgotten. I was chosen. And you? Have you ever learned that your suffering was recorded not to dismiss you, but to verify that you could lead others through their own? The final page held a single quote from the previous director of intelligence: "If she survives her family, she'll command the nation." I didn't cry, but I did sit, not in grief, not in pride, in clarity. The life they mocked was never random. The path they questioned was never accidental. And now I was the answer to a question they never had the courage to ask. Hours passed. The base quieted. The mountains sank into midnight. I stayed alone in the command chair, watched satellites cross the globe like silent sentinels, watched my reflection in the dark glass. Not a little girl in her brother's jacket, not the sister who didn't belong, not the daughter they left off the seating chart. Colonel. And you know something. It wasn't the rank that mattered. It was the fact that this time when the silence came, it came with respect. I sent one message that night. Encrypted. One way. No reply required. It went to my family's group thread. No need to write back. Just letting you know I'm safe. If you ever wondered what happened to me after graduation, the president called me Commander. Today, they called me Colonel. That's all. I hit send. Closed the screen. Turned off the lights. Let them read it at breakfast. Let them choke on coffee and confusion. Let them say nothing or too much. It didn't matter anymore. Because somewhere out there, another mission was waiting. Another life would depend on my order. Another team would execute with precision based on the calm in my voice. I didn't rise from erasure to be understood. I rose to be unshakable. I rose to become the command they never saw coming. And as the night deepened, I let one final thought pass through me, not bitter, not sweet, just true. The girl they dismissed became the woman they now can't reach, and I wouldn't come down just to be seen. There's a particular silence that only those in command truly understand. It's not the absence of noise, it's the weight of responsibility pressing into the space where fear used to live. The following weeks at Shadow Command blurred into a rhythm of decisions that left no room for hesitation. No one second-guessed me. No one asked if I'd double-checked. They executed because I had spoken. That's how trust works at this level. It isn't sentimental, it's survival. I approved strikes in frozen mountains no map would dare label. I signed off on extraction ops, so classified even the operatives didn't know the full mission. I sent encrypted messages that could change the trajectory of governments. Each day, I sat beneath the red glow of the situation board, watching red lines shift across continents like blood vessels tracing power and threat. I rarely ate at regular hours. I slept in 2-hour segments. I lost track of time zones and dates. But I never lost myself. Because for the first time, my existence wasn't in opposition to my role. It was the role. There were moments brief, like flickers between operations when I allowed myself to remember. The dining room at age 15, where I had once drawn a blueprint of a makeshift communications relay, and my father scoffed. The hallway when I was 17, when my mother said, "Don't be dramatic, you're not military material." The silence at 21, when my siblings made a group chat without me. They didn't know it then. But they were shaping a weapon. One insult at a time, one erased birthday at a time, one passive-aggressive silence at a time. You know this, don't you? That the worst wounds don't bleed. They vanish you. But here, at the center of defense and command, I had reappeared. Completely. Irrevocably. Then came the day the letter arrived. It wasn't official. It wasn't coded. It came through civilian channels, hand-delivered in a nondescript envelope. Inside was a card. Cream paper. My father's handwriting. We watched the clip of the president shaking your hand. I didn't recognize you at first. You stood so tall. Your mother says congratulations. Your sister wants to understand. I don't know what to say, except we were wrong. I hope we didn't lose you forever. Dad, I stared at the words. Then I read them again. They weren't cruel. They weren't defensive. But they were late. And when truth comes late, it doesn't land like peace. It lands like a question. Like, why now? Like, do I open this door again? I sat with it for 2 hours. No response, no impulse. Just stillness. Because you know the truth, don't you? Once you've led a team through fire, a lukewarm apology doesn't warm you. Later that night, I walked the perimeter of the base alone. The moon hung over the canopy like a watchful eye. In the distance, I heard the quiet rhythm of coded drills, a pair of junior officers sparring, laughter at the end of a successful sim. Life was continuing, and I was no longer waiting to be included. I reached the helipad at the summit of the outpost, sat on the ledge, boots planted firm, hands resting lightly on my knees. I pulled the letter from my jacket again, read it once more, and I thought, what would I have given to hear this 10 years ago? Would it have changed me, softened me, held me back? Maybe, maybe not. But I no longer needed the answer, because the woman I had become didn't grow in their house. She was forged in silence, in failure, in missions that left no room for approval. They didn't raise me, adversity did. And now, even their words couldn't change the architecture of who I'd become. You understand that? Don't you? When someone reaches for a version of you that no longer exists, I ripped the letter in half, let the pieces fall into the forest below, not out of spite, but ritual, a farewell. The next morning, I approved an op that had been pending review for months. It required delicate coordination across 6 national zones, 10 assets, and 27 fail-safes. I did it in 10 minutes. No committee, no advisors, just me, Colonel. Later, one of the new recruits passed me in the corridor. He paused, saluted, then said, "You're the one from the president's ceremony." "Right." I nodded. He swallowed. "My mom watched that clip 10 times. She cried. I blinked. Didn't expect that. She said," he continued, "that seeing you in that uniform made her believe things could change. And just like that, I realized something I hadn't understood before. They tried to forget me, but the world remembered. Not because I made noise, but because I endured. Because I stood when everyone else assumed I'd fall. You don't have to scream to be seen. Sometimes, you just have to survive visibly." A week later, I received another invitation, not from my family, from the Office of the Secretary of Defense. They wanted me to attend a closed-door roundtable on strategic modernization, not as an observer, not as an aide, as the leading commander of shadow operations. It would be televised. Not the conversation, but the moment I entered, I knew what it meant. Optics. They were going to show me. To the country. To the world. To them. The night before the appearance, I ironed my uniform myself. No aides, no stewards, just my hands. I polished every metal, checked every crease, buttoned each clasp with the precision they once mocked. And when I stood before the mirror, I didn't see a daughter. I didn't see a sister. I saw command personified. When I walked into that room the next day, the cameras turned. The generals nodded. The secretary rose. And in the 3rd row, invited as silent attendees, were my parents. Not because I asked, because protocol demanded acknowledgement of lineage. They stood as I entered, but I didn't look at them. I walked straight to the table, took the seat at the head, opened the dossier, began the briefing. No hesitation, no apology, no permission. And in that room, with the lights, the flags, the nation watching, I didn't need to be remembered as their child. I was remembered as Colonel N. The briefing lasted 47 minutes, my voice steady, my eyes on the mission files, my mind moving 3 steps ahead of the next national security question. I didn't fumble. I didn't pause. I didn't ask to be heard. I was heard. Across the table sat 3 generals, each twice my age and none used to taking strategy from a woman barely in her 30s. But they listened, closely, because I wasn't offering opinion, I was delivering fact, tested in heat, proven in silence. I closed the folder when I was done, looked up, no one interrupted, no one challenged. The Secretary of Defense simply nodded once and said, "Colonel, thank you. Your clarity is exactly what this department needs. Not approval, not surprise, respect." The kind of respect that only comes when you don't just survive expectation, you exceed it so completely. They can't remember why they ever doubted you. I stood, saluted, and then, only then, turned my gaze to the audience section. Third row, my father's posture straight, as if trying to reclaim his role. My mother's hands clutched around her program, knuckles white, and my sister arms folded, face unreadable, staring at me like I was a language she never learned. I met their eyes, one by one, calm, not with defiance, not with pain, with distance. I saw my father mouth something, maybe my name, but the room had gone too quiet, and I had stopped reading lips years ago. I turned, walked out. The room rose behind me, not for applause, for recognition. Outside, I didn't head for the motorcade. I walked through the back corridor, down the steps, and out into the garden behind the department building. Security didn't stop me. They knew who I was, not because of a badge, but because of how I moved like a storm in full control of its path. You've felt that, haven't you? That moment when the walls that once kept you out now open at your approach. I sat on a cold concrete bench, under a bare tree. Winter wind bit through my coat, but I didn't move. I needed the cold, to remind me I was still alive, still separate. A few minutes later, footsteps approached. Soft, hesitant, familiar. I didn't turn. I didn't need to. My mother sat beside me, slowly, like afraid I'd vanish if she moved too quickly. She didn't speak for a long time, neither did I. Then, with a whisper so light it almost dissolved in the wind, she said, "You look just like your grandmother did in her officer portrait." I kept my eyes on the horizon. She fought in a different way, couldn't wear the uniform back then. But she wrote code for resistance channels in 43. Your father never believed in that kind of legacy. But I did. She stopped. Sighed. I didn't know how to hold that and raise you. That silence came again thicker this time, almost warm. "I'm sorry," she said. "For every birthday, I made you feel invisible. For every time I called your ambition difficult instead of brave. For every moment I said nothing, when I should have stood between you and their doubt." I turned, and for the first time in decades, I saw her not as my mother, but as a woman, tired, uncertain, carrying guilt in both hands. You know what it's like to finally see them as just human, don't you? Not villains, not heroes, just flawed survivors. I nodded once. "Thank you." She reached for my hand. I let her, just for a moment. Then I stood. "I have another briefing in 20. She didn't ask where. She didn't ask why. She just nodded. "We'll be watching. From home. If that's okay." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Some doors don't open again, but you can still walk past them without hate. Later that night, back in my private quarters at Shadow Command, I opened a secure terminal. There were 7 new mission updates, 4 classified memos, 1 direct request from the Joint Chiefs, and a message marked "Urgent Eyes Only" from an internal AI assistant I had helped develop during my early intel years. The message said, "Public sentiment on your image is rising. Polling shows increased confidence in female command roles tied directly to recent footage. We've simulated impact if you step forward as public-facing strategist. Approval projections exceed 72%. Would you consider moving from Black Command to strategic visibility?" I stared at the screen. Visibility. The very thing I was denied growing up. Now being offered on the largest possible stage, I closed the message. Didn't respond. I stepped outside. The base was still. Only the low vibration of generators humming beneath the earth. The sky was clear. Stars above, real and unmapped. And I asked myself, is this what power feels like? Or is it just silence finally turning into space. You've asked that, haven't you? When everything you thought you wanted comes not with noise, but with peace. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want a headline. I wanted to keep building what no one saw coming. The next day, I declined the public role. I chose to stay in the shadows where the work is real and the applause irrelevant. A month later, I received one last letter from my father. Short, careful. We don't deserve a second chance. But if you ever have a daughter, I hope we raise her differently. I didn't reply, because I don't need to look back anymore. The girl they overlooked has already crossed too many oceans. And she didn't cross them for home. She crossed them for the mission. Now, I command the mission. And every time I stand before a decision, I think not of them, but of the silence I broke through. The generations that will come after me. The women watching from balconies, wondering if they, too, can lead without asking permission. To them, I say, you were never invisible. You were unreadable to the wrong people. Step forward anyway. Stand still in your truth. And when the world finally sees you, don't shrink. Take the head seat. Open the dossier. Speak clearly. And never look back. Because the uniform they mocked became the truth they couldn't deny.